The sound of gray wolves, the first in 88 years re-entering California. We haven't been very nice to our creatures. The bear on the bear flag, the last one was killed in 1922 in Tulare County. The last gray wolf native to California shot in 1924. We want to hear your calls as we talk about Journey, the first gray wolf to re-enter California in 88 years. We'll have lots of time for that. Call at 866-893-5722 to talk about Journey, who also is known by the biologist named OR7 for his Oregon origins. Karen Kovacs is the wildlife program manager in the northern region of California Fish and Game. How exciting is this?
Well, it is certainly exciting. It's also very challenging given the public's high interest regarding the wolf return into California.
And so there have been, Twitter accounts opened up to kind of imagine what OR7 is thinking as he makes this trek into Northern California. Is there such a thing as too much attention?
Well, I guess it would depend on who you ask. I will tell you that over the last 30 or so days, my world has certainly changed from the standpoint of what I normally do in my role with California Fish and Game, and since OR7 arrived in California.
We'll be talking more about OR7, who he is, where he came from, what he's doing in California. But I want to hear from you. This is one of those stories that has really gripped the imagination of so many people. No gray wolves in California for 88 years. They were put on the Endangered Species Act in 1974 because they had been nearly wiped out in the lower 48 states. People would put together balls of pitch and wire, set it afire, roll it into dens, and kill pups and wolves. They've $50 bounty for a gray wolf nearly wiped them all out. Now one of them, OR7, crossing back into California. 866-893-5722 to answer your questions, maybe your sense of myths about gray wolves, right here at 866-893-KPCC after some news headlines from Hetty Lynn Hurdes. I just had to hear that again. There is no sound like it. The call of the wolf, the gray wolf, nearly extinct in the lower 48 states throughout the 19th century. They were killed wholesale. There was a bounty on their heads. The question of livestock versus wolves, well, the livestock and the ranchers won. Now a wild gray wolf has set foot in California for the first time in 88 years. His biological name is OR7 for his state of origin, Oregon. But the name in a contest for this particular wolf, Journey, his daily movements tracked by GPS technology for the benefit of Californians and of biologists. But there are a lot of myths about wolves as well. I want you to call and hear from you at 866-893-5722. Karen Kovacs, how real time is this monitoring of OR7?
It's up to date daily. We get a download from the satellite, which receives the upload from the wolf's GPS caller. We get that information at 6 a.m. every morning. And
of course, he's not looking at the sign saying "Welcome to California." What's he doing here?
Well, our sense is this animal, which he's 2.5, almost 3 years old, is exhibiting typical dispersal behavior of young animals. It's a male. Males of a lot of species are known to travel great distances, looking to establish a territory of their own, looking to find a mate, and basically go about their life. And so, again, this animal is exhibiting typical dispersal behavior.
Is he kind of an outlier, given that the population of gray wolves isn't large by any means?
Not really. If you look at the behavior of gray wolves, particularly from the reintroduction effort that occurred back in the late 1990s, I believe, in the Rocky Mountain states, it's not unusual for a male or even a female, young animals, to exhibit this similar type of behavior. If you look at how they've expanded their population through the West, it usually is initiated, again, by this same type of dispersal behavior.
Ms. Kovacs, what are some of the myths out there? I've read that, of course, we have Little Red Riding Hood. There's a new movie out called The Gray about some oil rig workers who are in a plane crash and they're surrounded by a menacing pack of rogue wolves. But I think it's usually the wolf that turns and runs the other way, isn't it?
Well, for the most part, if you look at the compiled documentation about wolves both in North America and Europe, and let's not forget that the gray wolf is also found in Europe as well, is if you look at the statistics on the numbers of fatalities with humans, for example, the wolf doesn't live up to that reputation. If you look at the causes of some of those injuries and attacks to humans, it typically, for example, may follow something similar with mountain lions. The animal was sick, the animal was very old, the animal was rabid. So there are a number of atypical factors that would cause, whether it's a wolf or a mountain lion or a bear, to cause harm to humans. But for the most part, you're absolutely right. They avoid people.
Matthew Kirby is the Washington, D.C. representative for the Sierra Club. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me on the show.
Of course, there are politics to the endangered species, politics to the reintroducing of the wolves in Yellowstone in the 90s. I remember reading those stories. Are there still the pitched battles between the ranchers looking out for livestock and the wolves and the people who say, bring them back into the ecosystem where they belong?
There are most certainly those battles, and we're seeing the beginnings of those in California. We're facing a place in Washington, D.C., though, where wolves in most of the northern Rockies were delisted from the endangered species list by Congress last year, the first time Congress has ever taken such an action, to actually remove a species not based on science but based on politics from the endangered species list.
And what are the politics? Who's in favor of going back to the 19th century standard, or even the 20th century one?
Well, wolves have been victims of prejudice since their earliest encounters with people. We can go back. They've been poisoned, shot, trapped throughout American history. When Yellowstone National Park was first created in 1872, gray wolves were already on the decline in those states, and the last wolf was killed from Yellowstone in 1926. What's often lost in this conversation, though, are the real benefits that bringing wolves back into the landscape have done, tangible benefits with the ecosystem, seeing species rebound, seeing ecosystems come into balance, not to mention the economic benefit. Wolves in Yellowstone alone bring $70 million into the economy every year.
How do they do that?
People who visit Yellowstone explicitly for the purpose of sightseeing wolves. Based on entry surveys, they say, why have you visited this national park? And they say, we come to see the wolves.
Wow, and to
that's
hear them,
one
of
national
course.
Park. Yes.
Lauren in Pasadena says she's a biologist studying animal behavior, says that the wolves are vital to the ecological habitat, certainly the balance of larger animals in the food chain. She said, how do you go about preventing some of these negative stereotypes and negative PR that would feed the politics that say, shoot the wolf, take him off the endangered species list?
Well, I think the American public, by far and away, loves the Endangered Species Act, loves endangered species, and loves wolves. These are icons of our American heritage, and it's really only in Washington, D.C. that you might think that people don't love wolves, because it's this vociferous anti-wolf extremists who are really being heard. But 90% of Americans love what the Endangered Species Act has done for species like the wolf, and it's the folks who want to see them coming back into California. Those are the folks who really have to speak up and make sure that they're heard and that their representatives are hearing them.
Are these kinds of conflicts with livestock and wolves likelier in this, or as likely in this century as they were in the past?
Well, those conflicts are, for the most part, pretty overblown. Less than 1% of all sheep and cattle deaths are actually caused by wolves. Digestive problems, weather, birthing problems kill far many more livestock than wolves actually do.
And I have to say, Mr. Kirby, I'm worried for Journey. I'm worried on his behalf that someone's going to get it into his head that here's a pretty damn good trophy, even though there are criminal penalties, I guess, attached.
Well, that's why I think it's so great that he's been in the media, that we have kids participating across the world and naming him, that there are Twitter feeds. And I mean, it's this sort of visibility where he's reviving the wildlife conservation story, and he's reviving the story of what it takes to have protected, connected public lands. He was only able to travel 1,000 miles because he was crossing National Forest land. He was crossing National Park Service land. And it's those conversations that I think the more we have those, the safer Journey and his fellow wolves that hopefully follow him will be. And
you think the more publicity about his special status, the more protected he may be?
I think absolutely.
And Karen Kovacs, we hang on your every word about Journey's journey. Where else can we look for more information about him?
Well, you can find more information on the California Department of Fish and Game website. We do have a link that's tied directly to this wolf in California, and it also offers links to other states and some information that people would find quite useful.
Karen Kovacs is the wildlife program manager in the northern region of California Fish and Game. Her life very different since Journey, the first wild gray wolf to set foot in the state of California, arrived in 88 years, arrived a while ago. You can find out more about him and his journey on the Pat Morrison page at kpcc.org. Thanks to Karen Kovacs and to Matthew Kirby with the Sierra Club. Ow!